How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? As you can probably see from the background, that is not a picture. It's my garden. It's a lovely day here. Temperature's up about 20 degrees C, which is really nice. But that's in the sun, not so much in the shade. But it's nice to be outside. Right. I'm an obsessive writer. Last year I wrote 4 books, one of which is currently stuck on the last chapter. 2 of the others have already been published, and both of them do need some rewrites, which is a bit of a nuisance. One of these books was originally called Reform or Ruin. This is going to be a recording of the first couple of chapters. It's about current politics, political parties, and that led to a discussion on whether politicians have been made redundant by the advance of technology. It's no secret that I have no love for politicians. In short, the book discusses where things have gone wrong, presents the current crises we're having to cope with, all caused by inept and corrupt politicians, and suggests a feasible future, but which is going to cause some serious disruption. I take the view that disruption is necessary for the survival of our species. Because this is a difficult subject and requires a knowledge of some of the new technologies, the underlying concept may take some getting used to. But here it is. The first chapter is called Fascism is the New Democracy. I think there is a way out of the mess that so many countries are currently in, due mainly to incompetent and indeed idiotic politicians with personality disorders. Increasingly across the supposed democratic world, it is most certainly the case that a much-used phrase is very true. It's a waste of time voting because the government always gets in. I think it comes from Ireland, hence the silly accent. In England, there is supposedly an opposition party. It's called His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. Isn't there a clue in that name as to its purpose? Their job is to oppose the government. 9 times out of 10, they don't do anything of the sort. That means they are not doing the job they're paid to do. So they're collecting a pay packet by deception. And, more importantly, the people who did not vote for the government aren't represented at all, which defeats one of the main purposes of the democratic process. I'm going to start this treatise from a revolutionary position. Once upon a time there was such a thing as democracy. We need to go back and look at what that really meant in terms of how things worked. We then need to have a look at how the current form of democracy has moved so far from its original idea that it long ago ceased to be democratic in nature and indeed ceased to be useful, or indeed fit for purpose. In fact, if we look at the idiotic shoutings from Washington, D.C., we find that the neocons' view of democracy has nothing whatever to do with the original ideas formulated in ancient Greece. Modern American democracy, according to them, is fascism, pure and simple. Do as you're bloody well told or you'll be annihilated. That seems to be the standard battle cry. As of writing this, the US government is destroying Ukraine in the name of restoring democracy, when it was the US government that overthrew the democratically elected government and installed a dictator. Washington isn't the only political disgrace on the planet. I shall be arguing that the most dangerous class of people on the planet is the class known as politicians, and they need to be rooted out and destroyed. The interesting thing is that in the old days, that means before the 21st century, that would have been well nigh impossible. But that's no longer the case. Give me a little of your time, and I will explain how this drastic measure can be done, and hopefully done peacefully and legally. Let's start with some context. I'm writing as a UK citizen, so we'll start with a view from there. You can take it that as I write this, I'm ashamed to be British and not too keen to be living in Europe. I'm sitting here watching the decline of the West and the rise of rampant fascism, together with what 100 years ago was called moral turpitude, and more recently blatant doublespeak and rampant promotion of misinformation. But for the moment, never mind what I think. I'm interested in what others may think, because if I'm on my own, just sit in the garden and shut up. I can afford to keep quiet because I'm well into retirement age and will probably just about manage to die before things become intolerable. This is also written before any 2024 UK elections. In fact, most of this book was written over the course of 2023. It starts with a question. How did you vote in the last UK election? Presumably you voted for your representative to support a few basic things you wanted government to get on with. Several years later, the question is, are you a happy bunny? Let's have a check on some of the things that were supposed to get done and find out what kind of success rate the government can chalk up. I believe the majority of people voted for the following. Maybe that wasn't you, but it was the majority. And even if it wasn't you, are His Majesty's loyal opposition representing you? Okay, here's a list. 1. Bring back control of the UK to representatives in the UK rather than in a foreign country. Sounds reasonable, but not everybody was in for that. Probably because they thought the government in the UK was, I'll use a rude word, but you can imagine it. How did that one do? So far, no signs several years later of any significant move on that front. In fact, far from any success, it seems as though Westminster has actually lost control of one of its provinces. Has our one and only gunboat, unfortunately, sunk? I shouldn't be laughing, should I? 2. Support the UK fishing industry? Gone quiet, hasn't it? How's that getting on? 3. Get back control of the country's borders. Looks as though we've lost one, and the other borders are about as strong as a fence of spiderwebs. Ooh, that's a seriously sore point. Your tax money is going to support illegal immigrants in hotels. Don't remember that being part of the election manifesto. I thought the UK had a rather good armed force. Can't they even protect the country's own borders from unarmed guys in rowing boats? It must be embarrassing to be in the British Armed Forces these days. There is another question that needs to be asked here. Why have you voted for a party that wants to look after foreigners? Sounds like a weird form of political ideology to me. And it gets worse. The current mob in charge, let's leave aside for the moment whether they really are in charge of anything, which I very much doubt, has spent and is still spending outrageous sums of money supposedly to support a corrupt government on the other side of the continent. Is that something you voted for? Is that what you work overtime week after week and pay taxes for? And perhaps I should also ask how these billions are being spent. Well, are they produce anything tangible for the UK electorate? I think I'm up to number 4. How is the current government managing the economy? 5. Inflation is under control, is it? 6. No doubt you're pleased with the way the government is looking after your interest in a general way. Imports going well? Costing less these days? Or more? 7. Energy requirements all going swimmingly, I suppose. Plenty of heat and power available for the winter cold and to keep the wheels of industry turning most industriously. 8. In fact, are we all better off than we were at the time of the last general election? How about 9? Are we more confident about the future now than we were back then? There are 10 categories, so the total out of 100 possible points shows how well the government is achieving what it claimed to set out to do. Well, there's the chart. I think the above list of achievements is so bad as to be described as way, even below appalling. I would have thought that a figure lower than 45 would demand a new government. But 3? Surely that amounts to treason. See you next week for Chapter 2. In the meantime, have fun, and sorry if where you are isn't quite as nice as where I am, but I don't like the English weather. Okay, see you next week.